Now we can move on to the final challenge, which is very exciting topic. Um, and it is zoning and permit. So, Angela, can you tell us about your experience of getting permission for the Milky Way shipping container farm?
Thank you. Let me just see all who's here. I just want to take a look. Okay. Okay. Thanks everyone. I have to tell you, just from the speaker's perspective, so you're going to see that I've had quite a few zoning challenges, and I don't yet have a container farm. I would say that you're both inspirational as well as I'm feeling quite trepidatious, but with some really good problem solving. So I really appreciate the real hands-on problem solving and the very technical, like, make sure that you have someone that's good at tech and fixing pumps. Have an extra pump on hand, like just those kinds of, and all the cleaning protocols. It is very inspiring. I really, really appreciate it. So for all of you who are thinking of starting up a container farm, possibly in Toronto, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the zoning fun that is in Toronto. So I'm just going to share my screen and I can do this. I know I can. There we go. The reason why I'm giving myself like I can do this encouragement is because I've had a few times where things haven't worked out. So I'm just going to give myself encouragement while I talk to you. So I am sharing my screen. First, can people give me a thumbs up if they can actually see it? Yeah, okay, thank you. So you've seen this one. And I can see people, if there's anyone else that wants to turn on their screen just to show me that they are listening, because sometimes it's hard to talk to blank screens, just so I know. Because, zoning is not as interesting as how do you deal with hydroponic farms and having to mop things up. So anyway, but the zoning is really where it's at for actually getting it. So I talked a little bit about the Milky Way, and there's a number of people here who know where the Milky Way is. And so the Milky Way actually started way back in 2006. And as you can see with old Toronto's old recycle bins is where it started. It was at that point considered an abandoned property, and it's zoned residential. We had about 30 Milky Way, we call it our Milky Way core group. We had 30 English language learners that were growing food and probably going home with about a grocery bag of fresh produce a week. So it's a lot of produce. And that's because we had highly skilled, and we still have highly skilled farmers that are from all over the world, but especially in our neighborhood from Tibet. Who had been forced to move into India and did a lot of, and Nepal and a lot of different spaces in order to, and brought them their skills here. So incredible intensive growing that happened, outdoor growing. It was bought, so it was residential. It was going to be into 3 condos. It's in a laneway, had no access to water or to hydro. So at one point, then finally, it was bought by something called the Parkdale Neighbourhood Land Trust. It is now considered something called community owned. You can look up the Parkdale Neighbourhood Land Trust. This is an excellent way to deal with abandoned, and I'm putting that in quotation marks because it's never abandoned by the wildlife or by our beautiful birds and bees. When I came to this land, this space first, when I became the executive director of Greenest City, it was full of gorgeous pollinators. And so it's not abandoned by, it's abandoned by humans, but not necessarily abandoned by all of our beautiful wildlife in the urban world. I'm going to speed over this stuff, but we did a design, we had a business plan, and then a business plan for the entire space. And then I did a business plan for Vegging Out, which is the container farm. Now let me talk about the zoning. So what do we have here? The zoning is residential, and in Toronto, there was a big stop to being able to do urban agriculture. You're not allowed to sell food on residential property. You're not allowed to sell anything. It's changing a bit, but you are not supposed to sell anything. So no commercial, and it's slowly but surely changing. And you're not allowed to have a community garden on a residential property. You can grow your own food, but you're not allowed to share your space with anyone else. Finally, we got site plan approval after 4 or 5 years. You'll see that by doing an exception. So because of a pre-existing use, of community food growing, we were able to get our community garden approved. Now you notice this isn't commercial. So how we've approved of a container farm, and the Planning Toronto is aware of this, the planning staff there, is because it's a social enterprise and we're a not-for-profit and it's an employment enterprise, they prioritize those pieces over the fact that we're going to be selling our food because we're not making money. The money is going back into the project as a social enterprise. That is how we justified the zoning, which you're not allowed to do commercial and you're not allowed to communally grow food. So pre-existing use, and we made it more of a social impact than an entrepreneurial impact. As I said, that site plan approval took many, many years, and we actually just received a final approval process. I'm not going to go through the whole site plan process. I'll do it pretty quickly. 2017 was the designs. 2019 was the application. We had to go through all of our site plan requirements. We hit all kinds of barriers, which I'll go through next. And we finally had our site plan official meeting in 2022. So site plan went in 2019. We finally got a formal site plan meeting in 2022. That's a long time. And it wasn't all because of COVID. It was because the city dragged its feet on a very small and tiny project. There really wasn't on anyone's radar screen. And so we needed to increase how much people cared for it by being a very squeaky wheel. The experts we needed, and I heard a little bit from Fred about some of the experts that you needed, but the expertise that we needed was an arborist, a noise consultant, a fire access consultant, landscape architect, electrical engineer, a civic engineer, and this is just our beautiful, amazing Kendall Flower, who is a landscape architect extraordinaire who manages all of our contractors for the entire space. And we got our formal site letter approval finally in 2023 in the spring. But the city still managed to lose it. And they lost all of our stuff. They lost all of our alternative plan solutions, our fire plan solutions. They lost everything. So I want to tell you about other site zoning bylaws. There's bylaws for noise. So the container farm heat cooling unit exceeds Toronto's bylaws for noise. The street distance to the container farm in the laneway exceeded the fire access code, and the actual container distance to the buildings did not meet the fire code. So again, we received a 3-stop, 1, 2, 3 on our bylaws. We came up with solutions though. So our noise consultant we came up with an alternative solution. We had extremely angry neighbors about how ugly this was going to look, how terrible the noise was going to be, and how unsafe this was. They were okay with flowers and plants growing outside because it's beautiful and lovely, but the idea of a container farm, they were worried it was going to be way too ugly, way too noisy, and as a matter of fact, someone has already sold their house because we got permission for this, our container farm. However, in this whole entire process, we had a ton of community support. Our city planner supported us, our local city councilor supported us, and there were supportive neighbors. But really what was important to the city was the broader community use, not just the residential people that lived very close. And that is key. That is really important if you're thinking of having a container farm in the anywhere, is that it's not just about the people that live around, it's about the larger community impact that you need to demonstrate, as well as your own ability to be able to do due diligence. So us hiring our noise consultant, us hiring a fire code consultant, we even moved the container to a different space because the neighbors were upset about the one location. So there's a number of things that we did to demonstrate our due diligence and our efforts to be good neighbors. However, we've now been hit with more things. You can see this on the site on here. While we have site plan approval, we have been consulting with the build permit person. I'm sure they have a more official name than that in the city of Toronto. But we've been hit with more stuff because what happens is all of this goes down to the frontline staff who are amazing and wonderful, but they are not the ones that are able to give you exceptions. So we got a road deposit, even though we're doing nothing. We had a road deposit fee, even though we're doing nothing in the roads. We're actually doing not even nothing in the laneway, but we were charged a 9,300 deposit. That's okay. We're going to get that back. But if you're a startup, these are very hard fees to come up with. We were at first told that we had to have water access and electrical access. But in a laneway, the reason they couldn't build houses is because we didn't have any sewage and didn't have any hydro. So what were we going to do? So we managed, for the water access, we connected to an adjacent building. When it was first assessed by Toronto Hydro to bring electrical to our site, it was going to cost us $75,000, even though we are surrounded by electrical poles. It's because we have to have our own electrical, and this was going to be underground. And also this was a new staff person. So again, we pushed back and we asked for someone who'd been doing this for a very long time to come with this new staff person. And that person looked around, saw our local adjacent building and said, you can do this for much cheaper. And went into the building. There's 4 meters in that building, which it sounds a bit ridiculous, but it's 4 meters. Because there's a very particular voltage and ampage that's required by container farms, we had to have higher amounts that can actually come into the site than is typical of a residential space. But this building that we are connected to or adjacent to has all of that. And we already have a very good relationship. It went from 75,000 to 14,000. So now we have electrical to the site. However, we are now been given just recently a development fee. If you are building a house, this is owned residential, this fee would be waived. However, we're not building a house, we're building a container farm. And so we've been now given a $55,000 development fee. And so this is, again, a frontline staff doing their job. They are not allowed to give exceptions, even though they love this project. And so we have to move all the way to the top once again. In order to be able to find an exception to this and find people who've been doing this for a long time who have given exceptions in the past. So this is where we are right now, in the midst of, as well as we're still moving forward the build permit process. We're still trying to do some of the back end stuff, and we're still getting the electrical to the site. So there are some pieces that we're able to do before we get our before we get our build permit. And fingers crossed that we get this development fee waived. All right, that's my story in a very tiny nutshell. I felt like it was a
Thank you.
scene.
Angela, I
Thank you.
think you and I are going to have a very interesting discussion when GReena and West Neighborhood get together. My first message to you, move north of Steeles.
I know, that's everyone's message.
Because I will tell you, what you just explained to me, we were able to totally bypass and get a total express thing. First of all, we were first of a kind in Vaughan. No one had ever seen anything like this. But one thing that we had done earlier, which is a difference between Toronto and Vaughan, you're a single tier, we're a 2-tier municipality. Certain rules are given to the municipality that are not overridden by the region. You have double bureaucracy in Toronto. One of the things that we had to do was to show that actually we were on institutional ground. We went back to look at the zoning of our original building where we landed the container. It was institutional. They were going through a bylaw change for the master bylaw, 30 years since they had last updated it. And we asked for, before we even put the container on, we asked for agricultural zoning. Why? Because originally our land was a farm. So we said that we should be able to still farm the land. It was a prior use. And so they agreed. It's actually embedded in the City of Vaughan bylaw. So when we came for the process, we said, well, it's agricultural. We are 15 meters away from any neighbor, so we're far away from a noise perspective. So a lot of the things that you just discussed and the things, every roadblock that they threw at you, the only thing that we really had to deal with was the firewall. That's what took the longest. And we're getting final sign off, and that was because they thought that the water backflow that we use, the water hose that we use to fill the rafts, was allowing stuff coming back, which it doesn't. But we have to now get a P engineer to put his seal of approval on how this particular backflow works. And once that is done, our entire project is signed off. We didn't have to go through the types of departments you did. So when somebody tells you, consider moving north of Steeles, that is why.
Oh, I know. Fred, I've heard of your story and I've watched, like I know about your story, and this is what everyone says as soon as they hear about the challenges we've had. I'm also very familiar with other city codes and where we need to go with Toronto. My goodness. Yes, it's not an easy pathway. Although I live and work in Parkdale, and I'm very committed to bringing this local food to our neighborhood. It could take another 5 years before we get all of this taken care of. But I do feel like we're getting there slowly but surely. Don't tell me to move north of because I'm very tempted. I'm very tempted. I really would like to get this up and going.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Fred. So since we're running out of time, there are a couple of questions in the chat. Maybe Angela, you can respond to them in the chat. And I would like to ask Lesley, since you have touched upon the challenges of zoning and permits, and you also mentioned something along the line of CEA not being permitted use on rural farms. Could you tell us more about it in like 2 minutes, possible?
Yeah, just quickly, even, I mean, so I think Fred's experience would be a great networking opportunity because it's not always easy, especially to get new kinds of farms introduced into spaces. So greenhouses actually are relatively easy because they are considered an existing form of agriculture, but it's relatively new to use vertical farms in Ontario. There are some, but it's taken each one of them quite a lot of work to get the space zoned properly, because it's not always the easiest. Because it's not an existing, typical form of agriculture. Andrew and I were just texting earlier that there is a wonderful person who could probably help you if you're trying to get a vertical farm installed in a farmland area. His name is Fadi Al Daoud, and he works for the Canadian government, Agriculture Canada, and he is a wonderful resource for actually learning how to do the zoning issues around that. Yeah, but it just, Angela's experience, it's not a simple process to install a vertical farm in your driveway like all the companies say. One of the caveats they always say is depending on local zoning laws, and that, my friends, is the catch.
Thank you, Lesley. Now let's move to the final section, which is about what is next for your farm. What are some emerging opportunities and challenges that are related to your farm, and how you might respond to them. And I think we can begin with Lesley again.
Well, I think Lucía and I were also talking about this idea of crop selection. I think that is a real opportunity. And so looking for specialty markets, I know it's not going to feed everyone, but it's going to feed some people the precise food that's culturally appropriate to them. So thinking about the food selection, I think that niche market idea, even Aki mentioned it as well, really helps you create a viable business opportunity. So that is the direction we're going for. We're thinking about saffron for what it's worth and whether we can incorporate that as a culturally sensitive, but also economically viable business, because again, it's something that is, it's not lettuce. I am totally in awe of Fred and Aki making it work with lettuce.
Thank you, Lesley. Let's hear from Lucía about Raiz vertical farm.
Thank you. Yeah, so for us, what we're going to do next is to standardize the production of the farms. So up to now, we have this one farm that we did in a do-it-yourself kind of way. We develop standard operation procedures, we develop hygiene protocols, we develop all the manuals for people to be able to, once they buy the farm, operate the farm in an easy manner, run events, and have a product catalog that allows them to understand what they can grow. Now that we have this, the natural next step is to be able to produce the farms at scale. And for that, we are partnering up with a container manufacturer. It's a company that is transforming containers. They are doing it mostly for renewable energy projects, but they are also working with agriculture more and more, and we are trying to get there. And on the other hand, we have a research and development kind of project funded by the EU, where we are developing our own hydroponic system. There is a small hydroponic system intended for indoors, for restaurants, for supermarkets, for residential areas. And yeah, that's less on the business side of things, it's more on the product development, research and development side of things. But yeah, those are our next ambitions, let's say. And once we have the container farms ready to be sold at scale, then we want to grow worldwide. That will be the idea.
Thank you, Lucía. That sounds very exciting. And next we want to hear from GReena. Either Fred or Aki
Yeah.
can.
So now that we have our market, we have our clients, but there's actually a lot more people that are actually interested in our kosher produce just because it's locally grown in the area. It's also certified kosher. It saves a lot of time and it's an appeal for a lot of people. So we're going to try to slightly increase our production, which will also help with our revenue and cover some of our costs. So we're going to add another level on each side of our container, one additional runway, which gives us additional 450 heads of whatever we want to grow. And in total, we'll have about 1,700 per batch, and it will help us significantly. Fred, did you want to talk about the New Horizon grant?
Yeah, actually, if you want to put the slide up, I think there's another piece that we want to share. So when you saw the number, and yes, I'm going back and forth. No, you're not on a boat. This is keeping the baby quiet. So what we were doing there, Aki, if you could put up the slide on the employment zone. Because GReena is a not-for-profit, we've positioned the hydroponic container and the growing as a social enterprise. It sits on GReena's P&L statement. But what we did in parallel was we found not only partners who would buy our stuff, but who would actually move into our building and provide employment training and opportunities for individuals with developmental disabilities. So we invested and we found some private donors adding to the federal funding that we received to start this project. So if you ask how much this took, the container itself was probably about $250,000. The landing pad, probably another 100. The setup of our mega farm for 400 containers, probably another 100, and then the balance plus a bit more to take an old greenhouse that was just being used for storage purposes and turning it into a packaging center. We also had a kitchen that was sitting dormant for 3 years during COVID, and we reactivated it as a kosher kitchen. And in all the contracts that we've set up with these people, there is an obligation, 1, to buy our produce, 2, to employ GReena individuals, and 3, to put a sticker on every product that leaves the building, highlighting the fact that it was either grown at GReena or packaged at GReena. And although you can't put a dollar value on that, you certainly can put a dollar value on the monthly rent, which I got our finance team to agree should be plowed back in. So not only are we generating revenue from the produce, we have some captive markets right at our building, and they're the ones who are taking it out to the market. We aren't establishing the retail channel. They've established the retail channel. We're pumping product in, And we're making our margin on the fact that we've reduced the cost that they have to incur in kosher supervising their own leafy greens because it arrives ready to be used. So you see here a Pure Greens company. They've been doing kosher leafy greens for 6 years. As I had mentioned earlier to Lesley, move north of Steeles and things get a lot easier. So they moved from Bathurst to Lawrence, and they are now located Bathurst north of Steeles. La Briute is a caterer and a restaurant. They use our products both for their salads when they need them, or they're going to be looking at some other products that are being higher value. And earlier we were working with dry goods as well. So we've got all of that together. So part of what Aki has been saying is not only are we looking at increasing capacity inside the container, but because of the way that we have repurposed an existing building that had to pivot because of COVID, we actually turned that from just strictly a program center to a program and employment zone. So that was the secret sauce with us. We're generating about $5,000 a month just in rent that's coming back to us. Plus they are paying for the utilities, the use of water, etc. And that goes back to GReena because that's a direct cost to them. So it's a good partnership inside of our organization. We combine social enterprise with social conscience. That's the way that we are looking at expanding. If you want to go to the last slide, Aki. And just to look at the numbers, we've now got 5 people employed who were not employed before. That's part-time because they can only work so many hours a week. Aki has mentioned that we're going to grow from 324, and eventually, once we get to our 4th level, we will get to 436. We have had at least 20 leafy green batches certified. We've packed over 1,000 spinach and lettuce containers through Pure Greens, and the 23,500 number is actually now over 30,000 food containers packed and labeled, not all of them with GReena produce in it. And they've also catered about 20 events. So these are just some of the results. These are some of the measurements that we are looking at to measure our success. Do not touch my computer, little one. Okay. Sorry, guys. Now I've got all 3 grandchildren in here. It's going to be a little bit even more challenging, but I think I've made my point here.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay.
So we want to hear from Andrew.
Great, thanks. So what's next for us? Well, we're in the new semester. Well, that's because we're at the institution talking semesters, but we are finally getting our paperwork finished with food services. So we're looking to actually start providing our campus food services with regular shipments of whatever it is they want. That's what we're waiting for them to make up their mind of what they want. And so it looks like it's going to be lettuce that they're going to serve in the salad bar on campus, which is actually really exciting. So that's one thing. We're also going to be doing research in the upstairs as intended. Finally, it's been a little while to get something sort of ready to go up there. And then farther in through the year, we're actually going to be expanding, or the intention is that we're going to be expanding with new controlled environment agriculture facilities up at our King campus. So the intention is to have some for testing new technologies, maybe for sensors, for energy analysis, for any kind of data collection that we can do on controlled environment agriculture, and then also some setup specifically for mushrooms. So we can get into doing mushroom growth and research around that. And the idea is to support companies where we can, or businesses, or people who want to investigate these kinds of things. So it is a support facility. We're not just doing our research. We want to partner with everybody. So please feel free to reach out if you have ideas for partnership. That's what we're doing. We're doing now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. And finally, let's hear from Angela.
Well, my next steps include, of course, getting that development fee waived. I currently have some funding in order to pay for staffing and the beginning costs of my the container farm, and then building the rest of the Milky Way, actually, so that it is site accessible. So we need spaces for people to be able to use wheelchairs and scooters, and then all of the electrical and water access on site has to happen. And we're hoping to get our greenhouse built. And, as I was listening to Lesley, I'm like, oh, I should be going for greenhouse and vertical farming instead of going for my container farm first. But I'm actually on a path. But maybe I'll talk to Lesley later. And the plan is to start learning a little bit more about how to fix pumps.
Thank you. Thank you, Angela, and thank you all the speakers for sharing your experiences and knowledge with us. We definitely learned a lot. Thank you again. So I would like to pass the floor to Sai.
Hello, everyone. That was a very insightful session packed with so much information and amazing questions from our audience. So I'd like to thank our speakers again, Fred and Aki from GReena, Lucía from Reyes, Lesley, Angela, and Andrew for coming and sharing their knowledge and experience with everyone. And to our audience, thank you for spending your Monday night with us. And I hope that you had found that informative, that you learned something new. And we will be sharing the recording once it is ready. Our speakers have also graciously shared their contact information in the chat. You might have to scroll up a bit because that was earlier on in the session, in case you would want to connect and reach out and maybe ask more specific questions if you see any opportunities. Again, thank you, everyone, and have a good night. Have a good week as well.
Everyone's staying